everyone, and welcome to the Champlain Trail Museum in Pioneer Village. This is our main building that I'm in right now. So this is Founders Hall, and I'm going to take you on a little tour of the museum. So to start, we have the couple exhibits on the prehistory of the area. So this exhibit is about the Champlain Sea and the large mammals that were in the sea. The bones that are right here are replica bones from a bowhead whale that was found near White Lake. The bones are the original bones for that whale are actually at the Museum of Nature in Ottawa. And the Champlain Sea was a prehistoric sea that covered quite a large area of Ontario and into Quebec as well, as you can see on the map. Whenever the last ice sheet retreated, approximately 12,000 years ago, the water advanced from the Atlantic Ocean westward along this depressed trough to create a large sea. So that's why the Champlain Sea was formed. And below we have fossils from the area of organisms that lived in the sea. And when you go around the Ottawa Valley, you can find a lot of fossils and rocks of organisms that lived in the sea. And then we continue in talking about the prehistory in this exhibit about the early Indigenous people that lived in this area. So the Algonquin people that live in the Ottawa Valley, they trace their roots back to ancestors that lived here, and they lived in the area from about 10,000 years ago and right up to the present. We still have Algonquin people that live in the area and live in the Ottawa Valley. So this is an exhibit about some of the artifacts that have been found in the Ottawa Valley that belong to Indigenous people. This exhibit right here features artifacts from the Meath site, which was a series of sites that were found in the 1970s. And all the artifacts date to the Archaic period, right up until post-contact, so right up until the 1600s. And then over here we have the clan rocks. Of course, the Anishinaabe or Algonquin people, they have different clans, and the people in their communities belong to different clans. So this is some rocks that have the different clan animals on them. We have an exhibit about Samuel de Champlain. Samuel de Champlain came up the Ottawa Valley in 1613, and he was guided by Algonquin people. He had Algonquin guides that came up with him by canoe, and on his way up the Ottawa Valley, he lost an important astrolabe. Well, it's believed that he lost an important navigational device called an astrolabe. And an astrolabe is what he used for determining the latitude where he was at. So the museum has an exact replica of an astrolabe. And the original astrolabe that was believed to have been lost by Champlain is at the Museum of History in Ottawa. So we have an astrolabe here that's an exact replica of that one. The one that's at the Museum of History, the only difference is it's darker. The gentleman in the picture here is the person that made that that replica. Yeah, it was made by Computing Devices, a company in Canada, for Canada's centennial in 1967. There were a few examples of the astrolabe that were made for the Centennial Caravan, and this astrolabe was one of them. So that's where he fits into the story. One of Champlain's maps. This is his map that he did in 1632 of New France. And you can see the Ottawa River right here. And underneath is his ship, the Don de Dieu, and that's the ship that he sailed on when he made his journeys to Canada. He came to North America several times in his life. He established Quebec's the habitation at Quebec, so Quebec City, and he is called the founder of New France. So. That he traveled out of. This is the Port Authority Honfleur in Normandy, France. So this is where Champlain departed from on his voyages. This exhibit's about the fur trade. So that would be 1700s or very early 1800s. And then we come into the 1840s, 50s, when more people were coming to the area, and the people were coming to settle because of different reasons that they left Europe. And at that time, the logging and the timber industry was really booming, so that brought a lot of people to the area. So we have a barn loom in the back here, and the barn loom is what was used to make warm blankets and rugs and things that they would have in their house, and having, when they were first building smaller houses, they would make all sorts of blankets and rugs for using in the house. This is a spinning wheel. This is a walking wheel type of spinning wheel, and it's how they spun the wool from the sheep into yarn using these wheels. These were the early wheels, and then the sit-down wheels, we have one right over there that you would sit at. That was like a later type of spinning wheel. And it was operated by a pedal. You see the pedal underneath. But you would press it to make the wheel spin. So we come closer to present day, and we get into the late 1800s, early 1900s. So this is what you call a diorama of what a house looked like at the turn of the century in Pembroke. So we have the parlor room right here, and we have an audio station at different exhibits in the exhibit hall, and this will tell you about the exhibit you're looking at.
Welcome to the house my husband built in 1901. Please feel free to place your hat on the hall tree. The corner cupboard, it's originally from the McAdam Hotel in Campbellton. Now it holds my blue china all the way from York, England. Oh, I see you've noticed the picture of Peter White in our parlor. It is hard to imagine how Pembroke must have looked in 1828 before he established the lumber company, general store, smithy, and harness shop. I just need to slip away to the kitchen to attend to my ironing. I had my sad irons warming on our new wood stove from C. Devlin's and Sons, from right here in Pembroke. It is the most amazing thing, with an oven for bread and an area for simmering soup all inside the house. Our guest room is set up to care for patients as they mend with the medicine cup, chamber pot, and water pig. My husband is in his doctor's office, the last room on the left.
So this, in the bedroom, the type of bed that's there is called a sleigh bed, because it's curved at the head and the foot of the bed. The headboard is curved, so they called it, that's why they called it that name. And you have the wash basin and jug for washing up at night. Because not many houses had a good source of running water, they didn't bathe that often during the month, once or twice a month. Especially if you were lived out in the country and didn't have running water in your house. And this is the kitchen. So in this kitchen we have a stove from C. Devlin and Sons, and they were a company in Pembroke. So they made all sorts of stoves, and this is an example of one of their cook stoves. It's hard to imagine that something like that was made right here in Pembroke. Of course, we have the pump back there, and that's how they would get their water. And their water would go into, there's a bowl in the sink, and it's a dry sink. There's no drain and plumbing, so once they were finished using the water, they would just throw it out the door. Over here we have some butter making tools. So we have the butter bowl and butter paddles, and that's what they used for making butter. They also what they did first is they would use a butter churn to churn up the butter, and then they would smooth it with these paddles to get all the buttermilk out. And then this is the doctor's office that they were talking about in the audio. So a lot of doctors saw patients right in their own house, and doctors traveled quite extensively in the country to see people as well. So when if you heard the term country doctor, it's because they did house calls and they would go right to your house. So there's some of the different medicines that were used and prescribed. Over here we actually have a dentist chair. So the doctor also doubled as a dentist as well. In the late 1800s, there weren't a lot of dentists, so the doctor did both jobs. This is an exhibit about the Grey Sisters. We have a number of shadow boxes that were donated to us about their history. We also did a lot of embroidery type work and tatting for altars in the churches. So this is some of that work that they did. The Grey Sisters also operated the Lorraine School of Nursing in the early 1900s. And the cape that's over there is a nurse's cape from the Lorraine School of Nursing. And it has the letters on the collar PGH, and that stands for Pembroke General Hospital. And that nursing college ran until Algonquin College took over the nursing program in the area. So this is an early horse-drawn hearse, and this hearse came from the Fraser Morris Funeral Home. I believe it's now called the Heebner Funeral Home in Cobden. So this is it's a horse-drawn wheels, wagon wheels, and then in the winter time the wheels were taken off and there's sleigh runners underneath. Called the M.B. Malcolm Funeral Home at that time. Now it's Malcolm and Devitt's. So this is M.B. Malcolm's funeral director outfit. This is Bertha. This is the Pembroke's 1923 Bickle fire truck. and it was restored in 2011 by members of the Pembroke Fire Department and some of our own volunteers as well. And I'll turn on the audio for that. Tell a bit of the story about Bertha.
Fire Station Number 3 is the museum's newest exhibit, featuring Pembroke's historic 1923 Bickle fire truck, nicknamed Bertha. The Bickle was Pembroke's first gasoline-powered fire truck, and it's believed to be the only one of its kind. It was bought in 1924 as a way to lure Fire Chief Bob Day to head up the Pembroke Fire Department. The story goes that he didn't like Pembroke when he arrived, but rather than reject any job offer, he told the municipal council he would accept the position of fire chief if it would modernize by purchasing a gas-powered fire engine. Never believing he'd be taken up on the offer, 6 months later the town called Chief Day to let him know about the Bickle's purchase, and as a result, Pembroke ended up with one of its finest fire chiefs. The Aaron's Fox Bickle was bought for the hefty sum at the time of $18,000. It was made to order in Woodstock, Ontario, and was shipped up by rail in 1924. The arrival of the Bickle was heralded as a great event and was on the job within 24 hours. The truck remained the fire department's main pumper until 1954.
So the Bickle is still brought out for the Santa Claus Parade each year. So it does still run, and it's brought out for that, and it also goes to the Carp Fair almost every year as well. This is our general store exhibit, and in Pembroke there was one of the general stores was called George Lemke General Store, and you could find anything that you would need at the general store. It was one-stop shopping. People would come to stock up on the supplies they needed. If you lived out in the country, you might come to the general store once a month to stock up on the essentials that you needed. They did a lot of their own cooking, so you would come and buy flour and sugar and those type of staple things that the family needed for cooking and baking and that sort of thing. They sold dishes, cutlery, tools, building supplies, anything that you would need, you could buy at the general store. And this is a diorama of the inside of a shanty, a life in the Canoe shanty. So we have pictures from a logging camp and the inside of a shanty. So it shows the long tables where the men would eat. They would have cooked salt pork, beans, soups. That was the type of food that was cooked in the logging camps. When lumber mills were operating, when men were out in the forest. So when you see a video of the men taking down a tree with these like crosscut saw type of saw, that would have been done right into the early 1900s. So and before mechanized saws were starting to be used. Tom Stevenson, who's a local person, lives in Pembroke. He's very knowledgeable about different types of trees, and he donated all of these different varieties of trees to us, and they're all labeled. These tools that are here were donated by Tom as well. So these are tools that were used on the rivers. So for turning logs and for pushing logs, they would use cant hook. And then this is a pike pull for what was used to move the logs in the water. They could stick it in the point into a log and push it. And then this is a peavey, and the peavey was used for rolling logs. So these were very useful tools on the river when they were driving the logs down the river. The men would have been on timber cribs, and they would be pushing the logs along. Yeah, so this is so talking about the timber raft and the timber crib. The timber crib was so this is a timber crib in this picture, and then the raft was a whole bunch of timber cribs that were assembled together. They were fastened together, so makes up a full timber raft. So this is all smaller timber cribs that were fastened together. And it was a very dangerous job, very dangerous work. So this is actually a lumberman's cross that was found on the Petawawa River at Half Mile Rapids. Over here we have timber marks. So each company had their own unique timber mark. So this timber mark right here is from the Pembroke Lumber Company. J.R. Booth, he had his own timber mark, and you can see it right there. It's on the stamped on that log. So it was a J. You see the little, it had the J here, and then B with a diamond pattern around it. That's a J.R. Booth Company saddle. Were custom made for J.R. Booth. And it even is stamped with the JB. And this big wheel is part of the Corliss steam engine that would have been operating in a lumber mill, like the Consolidated Lumber Mill, which was where Supple's Landing is today. That's where there was a lumber mill there called the Consolidated Lumber Mill. And so this Corliss steam engine came from that mill. And before that it was called the Colonial Lumber. So it's had that mill had different names in its lifetime of being a lumber mill. So this building was actually built around it in 1979. They brought it, it came on the railroad track, and they brought it here and the pieces and took it off.
Wow.
And this is a Cockburn pointer boat. And this boat was donated by Consolidated Bathurst Company to the museum in 1986. So this was the main boat that was used in the lumber era for driving the logs down the river. So they used timber cribs, and they also used the pointer boat. So you could have more than 10 men in this boat on the rivers. And the useful thing about pointer boats is that they would float. The term was that they would float on a heavy dew, so they didn't require a lot of water to float in. So they were very useful on the rivers with, they could go right over logs that were floating and that sort of thing. This is a picture of one that had a cook stove in it. So they were big enough that they could actually have a cook stove in them. And they were designed by the John Cockburn and his family, and the Cockburns had a pointer boat making shop down at the waterfront in Pembroke for many years in the early to mid 1900s. Yeah, these nails were used by the Cockburns in their shop. This is a birch bark canoe, and right up until the point of contact with Europeans, this was the main type of boat that was used on the rivers and on the Ottawa River in this area. And this one was made, I believe, this one was made in Maniwaki. It would have been Algonquin made by a member of the Algonquin First Nation there. And then we have 3 birch bark canoes on top of the cases over there. Those canoes are all about 100 or more years old. Yeah. So there's a lot of carvers that traditionally lived in the valley. So not only like Algonquin or Indigenous woodworkers, but then there's also been other carvers that have done carving and have brought their carvings to expos and that around. So the carver that's featured over here is Carl Stang, and he was a carver that lived in Pembroke, and he brought his carvings to all sorts of expos and competitions. He did wonderful work. And Abe Patterson was another valley carver, and this moose carving was done by Abe Patterson. Carving. Hubert Klatt was another valley carver, and that's one of his pieces there. And that hung up in the office of the Pembroke Lumber Company for many years. And there's some more. There's Hubert Klatt. Hubert and Joe Klatt, they made this whole circus. It's called the Klatt Brothers Circus, and so these are all parts of the circus that they made. So in here we feature Superior Electric, a former company in Pembroke, and the Lee Manufacturing Company. Their products were Peerless incubators and brooders, acorn stoves, heaters, school desks and chairs, kitchen cabinets, folding chairs. So they made a variety of things. Superior Electric made irons and heaters, and they were located on the main street. It's a picture of that was right along Pembroke Street where it was located, its original location. So over here, and we also feature the Canadian Splint too, and that was located where Miramichi Lodge is now, and they made the splints for the matches, for boxes of matches that you would buy. Eddie Match as well. Steel Equipment Company made desks and filing cabinets and that sort of thing, and then the Pembroke Shook Mills made wooden boxes. We have a lot of pictures and records from these companies in our archives. Down in that area was where the Cockburns had their pointer boat shop. Yeah, so that's the marina there too. So thank you to the City of Pembroke for inviting us to be part of SnoSpree and to do this tour for everyone of the museum at a time that we're normally closed. And I hope to see you next summer at the museum. We have lots of interesting programs and events that'll be happening hopefully in the new year and this year. So come check us out on our website, www.champlaintrailmuseum.com, and check us out on our Facebook page. We have different posts that we put up each week. We have Archives Monday on Mondays and What Is It Wednesdays, where we feature an artifact from our collection. So check us out on Facebook and our social media channels as well. Thank you.